And I mean, I think that, when I was a kid, I never would have imagined that I would end up in product management working closely with technology. And I definitely wouldn't have envisioned the use cases that we have today. I mean, going from the tiny little cell phone that I had in middle school that if you went on the internet, it cost you like $5 immediately and everything loaded so
Yeah,
slowly to now that, so many users do the majority of their online behaviors are from their phone. At the very least, what I can say is that in the future of product management, the world of products that will be getting managed is going to explode. It's going to be so huge. There will be so many different directions you can go, and a lot of them will be things that directly impact your day-to-day life.
Welcome to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Brought to you by Hopkins Connect at Johns Hopkins University. In this podcast, we match students for a conversation with their dream mentor. Here's our student host for today's episode.
hi everyone. My name is Rajat. I'm originally from India and I was born and brought up in Delhi. I'm currently pursuing my engineering management and I'm a master's student. Today I'm speaking with one of my seniors, Dani, and I'm super excited for that.
Hi, my name is Dani. I'm from New York, but I actually just in the last couple of months moved to San Diego, California. I am a product manager working for a company called PulsePoint that is owned by WebMD. And I graduated from Johns Hopkins undergrad in 2016 with a major in economics and psychology and a minor in entrepreneurship and management.
You
You're
are listening
listening
to
to
the
the When
When
You
You
Grow
Grow Up
Up
podcast.
podcast.
Yeah. Hey, hi Dani. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon,
Yeah.
Rajat.
Yeah. This is one of a kind of experience for me as well because I'm doing it for the first time. So I just wanted to have one-on-one conversation with different alums from different departments because what usually happens that I'm from engineering management and I usually have conversation with my seniors from the same program. I think talking to different alums, talking about their journey helps you to understand more about the ecosystem. So that was my intent to subscribe for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to be doing this. I haven't done any podcasts before, but I do
Okay.
love talking about my career trajectory. And just to check with you, what's your area of focus within engineering? I know you
So
said engineering management, but yeah,
yeah,
so what
so
type of engineering?
it's basically an amalgamation of management and computer science subjects. So in engineering management, you have the flexibility to select from 8 to 10 tracks, and mine is computer science. So the dream was always to use technology to create products and scalable products as well, because I'm a firm believer that you can create a lot of products, but if you can't scale them, it don't have any much value. At the end of the day, I think when you are doing that, you should have that dream to create scalable products, to create value in that ecosystem.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you about this because that's something that I believe in firmly as well. I think reusability and scalability are big words in at work for me, and I think that's an awesome thing to be focused on.
Yeah, if you want, I can just briefly introduce myself, my journey before, what was the intent coming to States and all, just to start
Sure,
the
that would
thing.
be great.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated back in India from a hill station called Dehradun. My undergrad was computer science. And after that, I started working as a software engineer consultant with a management consulting firm back in India called ZS. So the intent was very simple. I knew that I want to do masters, but I wasn't very sure about it. So I gave myself a time frame of 2 years just to understand what is something I'm mostly passionate about. I knew it was tech, but specifically what in tech. So before joining the organization, the focus was simple. Let me understand what software development lifecycle is. Let me understand this whole tech ecosystem. And then let me try to find what I'm good at and what I enjoy. I was enjoying coding. I was loving it. But within a year, I realized that this is something that doesn't come too naturally to me. I have to be very, very skeptical or very, very focus driven to do that. Although it was good, but I realized in a long term, I won't be the best in it. So then I talked to a couple of product managers in my organization, couple of management consultants to understand their journey. And that fascination came when I was just attending a podcast during my work experience time, and the way product managers were displaying the project, the recommendation and their passion behind creating a product. I realized that although I'm coding, I don't have much of a knowledge how this product is going to be used. I'm just confined within my boundaries. And the way they were telling out the features, what value it brings. So I thought, okay, I'm doing something that has some value, but I don't know that. And talking to them, I realized, okay, I have the knowledge of tech, but I love this field more. So I had a couple of more conversation with them. Then I realized, okay, I can be good at it. I need to practice. So I decided that it has been 2 years. I don't have enough patience to go for an MBA. So let me find a degree where I can use my tech knowledge to understand the management ecosystem. And there I came to Hopkins. So I have completed my first semester. I'm in my second semester. It has been hell of a journey, to be honest, because as an international student, you are leaving your country for the first time. Cultural shocks you have, the new academic ecosystem. You have to cook for yourself for the first time in your life. It's again very, very, very interesting. So I think it has been a good journey, although challenging. I'm still learning, but super, super excited to talk.
That's great. And I very much understand where you're coming from, especially when you mentioned feeling like you didn't really understand the whole life cycle of the product. You were just building something that you were told to build. And that's actually a big reason for me for why I went into product management in the first place. So do you want me to share? I could share a bit about my journey.
100%.
Yeah. So when I was at Hopkins, I originally went to Hopkins to study international relations or international studies. And while I was there, slowly realized I wasn't quite as excited about the politics side of things. I was more interested in the more practical applications within economics, which is one of the focuses of the international studies major. And within economics specifically, I was actually really interested in behavioral economics, the psychology of why economics is the way it is, and essentially the belief that supply and demand works really well in an ideal theoretical world, but not really in practice. And how do consumers really respond to external stimuli, and how does that impact economics? And that led me to be interested in marketing. So that I ended up doing my dual major in economics and psychology with the minor in entrepreneurship and management for all of those reasons. And I did all of my internships in marketing. And as a senior, I was applying to marketing jobs. I was really interested in doing marketing research and strategy. I wanted to be focused on I was really interested in the idea of understanding why are consumers behaving the way they are, and then how do you apply that understanding to make a change to your marketing to get them to behave the way you want them to behave. And I had applied to several jobs, and I was very interested in this company called Bounce Exchange, which is now called Wonderkind, because that was their whole concept. They did little micro changes on websites to respond to consumers' behaviors on that site and get them to buy more. An example I really loved was there was a shoe website that was a client, and let's say you landed on a shoe, you clicked on a shoe product page, and you selected, shoe size 9, and then you went to another shoe page, and they did not have size 9 available. We now remembered that you are size 9, and as soon as you land on that page, we show a little pop-up, not a whole screen pop-up, but a little note that says, don't see this shoe in your size. Here are other options you might like that we do have in your size, and redirected you to and gave you the option to look at those other shoes. So those were little micro adjustments to understand why are you behaving the way that you are, and get you to stay on the site rather than just leaving. So I had applied to be on the strategy side, and they ended up moving me over to a different position in the company during the interview process that was ended up being essentially analytics and QA, quality assurance. And in that role, I was enjoying what I was doing, but I felt like I was not getting to see the full picture. And I got shifted within there to a more innovation-focused role where any new products that we were rolling out, I was supposed to oversee the QA process for those products, understand how those products will work, and how we can make a very efficient QA process. And that felt very niche. But I was finding that because of my role, I knew the products inside out better than most of the other people who were working on the products, even better than the product managers. And so as I was consulting on the QA process, they were having me consult more and more on how the product itself should actually work. And I was getting really excited about that opportunity to be involved, yet I wasn't the one actually implementing that. I was saying, you should implement it this way. And they were saying, okay, that's what we'll try to do. And they may or may not implement it the way I said. If they did, great. I didn't really get credit for that. If they didn't, I had to kind of work around that in my QA process and figure out a way to make it so that people wouldn't make as many mistakes, despite the fact that, because it was built in a way that I didn't think was the right way to be built. And so from there, I said, well, I want to be that person making those decisions. And so I ended up leaving BounceX or Wunderkind, and I worked for an insurance company for about 4 years. And there I was a full product manager, and I got to actually have that role, get to be the person who was making those decisions. And I absolutely loved that.
Yeah, yeah. I think your journey totally defines if you want something so badly, it will come to you. If not now, sometimes later. And I love this thing about product management ecosystem that there is no defined path to it. You talk
Yeah,
about software
absolutely.
engineering, you talk about software engineering, go get a computer science degree, get a job, do coding. But this is the only field in the engineering or technical ecosystem that I have found people come from diverse background. I think that is something which make it very unique. You have perspective from different ethnicity, different background with their thought process, and then you combine it to create magnificent product. I think it just tremendous to see that.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's a beautiful thing with product management, because that diversity of backgrounds, of people, of really of everything brings in so many new perspectives. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned in product management is, this is one that I always say with a caveat, but I've been told, never say no. That doesn't mean you do everything that people ask you, but it means your response should never just be no. It should be, tell me more. Or, well, I need to evaluate that. I need to look into that a little bit more and see. And maybe you're hearing something that you're like, okay, I'm definitely not going to do that. That is a bad idea. But you really have to push that thought process out of your head and say, well, let me think about this from every angle. Let me understand better why this person is suggesting what they're suggesting, and how can I incorporate that? And you never know what you can get out of that. And that can end up making the product better in a way that you didn't expect.
Yeah, and I think it teaches our important lesson about empathy as well, and then leading without the authority. You have to make a lot of decisions, but you are not leading anyone. You have to convince people, okay, this is something that is better for the product, and then carry on different teams together to make sure, okay, we are delivering that on time. And
Always. Yeah.
always, and you always have that thought, okay, what else I can do better? But again, you have to deliver it. So it's a fight between how can I improve it, prioritization, and doing the best for the customer as well. Keeping in mind that most of the time, customers themselves don't know what they want.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. So the amount of challenges, ambiguity is something, because I just wanted to be in a role where I can just operate in ambiguity. Let me be very, very comfortable with the fact that I don't know much of the stuff, but let me figure that out. I think product management gives you that ecosystem. And talking to you, I realized one important thing, that this job is kind resembles the American culture as well. Since I was very new to this country, I was traveling where I lived, and every person had a story. And this is all about storytelling as well. You have to tell a story to stakeholder, your customer. And in the American culture, you talk to someone, everyone has their own unique story.
Absolutely. Agreed. One thing I'm wondering is, should we take a step back and maybe share a bit more with the listeners what product management involves, what
What
it actually is?
100% sure.
Yeah. So I'll kind of share my thoughts, and maybe I'll get yours as well, because being someone who's so in the weeds of it every day, I think I sometimes don't think about, how it looks to an outsider. But I think at the end of the day, a product manager is essentially a mini CEO for their product. They are definitely still, have a lot of external stakeholders that are going to be involved in their decisions. But at the end of the day, they're kind of overseeing all the parts of that product. And their job is to make sure that that product gets from nothing, from an early stage idea, to something that exists, a real product. We often call it 0 to 1. And then from there, continually improving that product and figuring out what's the direction that product should go. So they're overseeing the strategy for it. And they're making sure that there's a reason behind those decisions of the direction of the product, and the enhancements that will be made, or the way it's being built in the first place. They're also making sure that it's being built on time, working closely with the engineering team, the engineering manager, to make sure that it's on track. They're involved in the testing process to make sure that it's working the way end users want. Starting from the beginning, they're also they sometimes are involved in understanding what the end users want, whether it's them doing the interviews themselves with end users or the research themselves, or if they have a UX team that's doing it for them, but understanding what the research says, what users want, and how that will inform their product. They're working with marketing to make sure that the marketing language reflects what the product is doing. They're working with legal, compliance, all of those teams to make sure that that the product is built in the way that it's supposed to be from those standpoints. Sales to make sure it's being sold correctly, also to get back feedback from sales. So they're really involved in the whole life cycle of the product and overseeing it from a strategic standpoint as well as an implementation standpoint.
Yeah,
Do you have
exactly.
anything to add on that?
Yeah, so I haven't directly worked as a product manager, but I've indirectly worked with them. I have done a couple of pro bono projects. So my understanding it from that particular level. So for me, if I have to sum it up, it is product manager is someone who has to lead without the authority. And that comes from the fact, although we have manager in our designation, we are not managing anyone. No one is reporting to us. We have to take all the teams, be it engineering, marketing, sales team together, tell them what the vision or the final product looks like in a way that they understand that. And then whenever there is a problem, you are the first one to accept that. And whenever there is a success, you give the credit to the team. So I think it is one of the most selfless job you could have, because if something goes wrong, it's your duty to take credit for it. And if something goes right, you have to give it the credit to the team. I think it's kind of a playing orchestra where you have to just narrate story to each and every person in a way that they understand, and you have to manage different teams. You have to be in the phase from ideation to providing that particular product to the customer, understanding their requirement, telling them what is better for them, because sometimes what actually happens, customer stakeholder don't know what they want, and you have to tell them the path which will lead to the best product they could have. So this is something for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point as well to add in. I think that customers often definitely do not know what they want, and you need to understand why they are saying that they want something, so that you can understand what's the best way to give them what they want.
100%, 100%. And I just wanted to understand, and when it comes to scalability, what do you think is the biggest challenges you face as an individual and as a part of a team as well?
Oh gosh, I would say that the biggest challenges with scalability end up being time, resources, money. You want to build something in a way that's scalable, but typically you start with one use case or a small number of use cases. And so you're building scalability based around that use case. And you can say, well, these are the other types of use cases that we are envisioning in the product roadmap, typically from having spoken to sales, marketing, whoever else is kind of on the client side or the user side, whoever is really understanding what users are asking for, they can help you understand what are the potential use cases, right? And you're saying, well, my first use case is this. I want to build it in a scalable way so that we can account for these other use cases. And often, you want to be the person who's making that decision of when will this get built by and what's our initial scope going to be. But unless you're the head of product, you're typically not going to be that person. And even the head of product, you may or may not. And so I've often found that I'm told, well, make it scalable, but you need to build it so that it works for this use case within this time frame, and this is your budget. And then I talk to engineering and they're like, well, with that budget, with that time frame, we'll build it for that use case. We can make it so that the code is flexible, but we can't really make it scalable to other use cases within those constraints that we're given. And so a lot of the time, it really doesn't get built in a way that ends up actually being scalable. And I find that we often end up needing to rebuild things a lot, and that costs more money later on and takes more time later on. And it's very frustrating because you were saying scalable, reusable all along, and it just doesn't end up being feasible a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, Danny, that product manager job is to do a ton of research, come to a consensus, and start the process. But do you feel that at any given time you feel that you have certain amount of information so you can get started, or you are always in that situation, I can get more information to make this better? So in that particular situation, how do you focus and how do you start working on it?
Yeah, there's always more information that you can be getting. And I think that there's a point at which you have to say, this is our MVP, minimum viable product. And that's, in the case of building a product from scratch, right? You're saying this is the bare minimum of what needs to happen. You need enough information, I think, to create. So my typical process with that would be do the research to understand how should this product what is this product solving and how is it going to solve it? Start with an initial design, and then put that design in front of users, get feedback from users, and then adapt that design based on that feedback. And so I typically find that once I have enough to say the feedback has been positive at this point, I'm going to start building. And now if there's more feedback that we can't fit in initially, it increases the scope really drastically, or typically that would be the reason. If there's just more feedback that we can't fit in initially, I say that's fine. We've closed our MVP. This is what we're starting to build, and I'm going to start using that feedback to put into the next stages of the roadmap to continually improve it. If it's a product similarly that already exists and you're just enhancing it, it's a similar thing. It's figuring out what feedback feels the strongest in terms of both the impact it will have on user behavior, whatever your end goal is, whether it's, sales or viewership of readership of a site, viewing different pages, that sort of thing. What will have the biggest impact for the least amount of effort? And you're kind of going from there. You want to have high impact, low effort, followed by maybe high impact, medium to high effort, right? And that's sort of your ongoing prioritization. So on the other hand, though, there are times when you start building and suddenly a new piece of feedback comes in, such as compliance said we needed to do this and we didn't do it, right? And that's something that you can't just launch that MVP without it. And that's going to cause you to have to stop, recalculate, and say, all right, we need to make this change, continue building as is. Maybe you can build this other thing that's not touching the compliance piece as we scope out what the compliance piece needs to look like as quickly as possible. It can definitely be a stressful job in that regard, but quickly as possible, let's get that piece scoped out, groom it with the engineering, make sure that they are clear on what that needs to actually entail, and then start to build it in as you can. And typically that also means adjusting the timeline.
Yeah, great. I think it is a lot based on intuition, data, feedback as well. So, Danny, I understand that in product management, we have to take a lot of decisions based on data, sometimes on intuition. So, in your career, have you been in a situation where data was telling another story and your intuition was saying something else? And how do you tackle that?
I'm trying to think about data versus intuition. I would say I've been more in a position of the data versus other stakeholders who have a bigger say. My intuition, I don't tend to follow it very often. My view is the data knows best, the users know best. Obviously, when it comes to the actual solution, they don't necessarily know best, but if the users are telling me this is a problem, then I'm going to be trying to solve that problem for them, and I'm going to look at the data. I'm not going to just go based on what I think is necessarily the right answer. So I was in I'm trying to think of a good example. I was working on an auto insurance product at my last company. And for the quote page, this is a page where you've now entered all of your details about your driving, you as a driver, and your vehicle, and you've now seen your quote. And you were seeing a quote or your price from, let's say, 4 different insurance companies, because we were acting as an aggregator. We're showing you 4 different prices. And I knew that we needed to have a good way for users to be able to easily compare those quotes, but the page got really messy because we're trying to show you can get a few different tiers of quotes. You can get the state minimum requirement. You can get something a little bit more in the middle. You can get something much higher if you want to have really extensive coverage. But you also have within each of those buckets 4 different carriers that are giving you quotes. And how do we show it in a way that you can compare it, but also be able to view each of them individually and have the page not be overwhelming? And I was being told by my superiors, the only way to do this is to show it as a comparison view, show a table with the 3 different tiers, and then each of those have the 4 different carriers, and basically compare everything side by side. And I said, no, this is so overwhelming, because if you've ever gotten auto insurance or looked at what those pages look like, there's like 10 plus different types of coverage that are included. And how are you supposed to know what to compare between them and what those differences even mean? And so my intuition here was, we need a way to show what is in common across all of them, and then highlight the differences if you want to see more. And so I basically came up with 2 different views. One that was kind of not really comparing them, but highlighting what are the commonalities, and then one that was pure comparison. And I ran those through user testing. And Fortunately, the user said, well, that comparison page, super helpful, but so overwhelming, which is what I suspected. And so what we ended up coming up with that got really positive feedback was the top of the page said, if you choose, let's say, the medium level of protection, here are the top 5 most important coverages, and here's how much you should be getting in most of these plans for them. There might be small differences between carriers, between the insurers, but for the most part, they should be approximately these numbers. Any plan you pick here, this is the numbers that you're getting. Here's a button to click to actually view individual rates for all individual coverage levels for each of those insurers and compare them side by side if you want more detail. And within that, we put a little red asterisk or put in different colors to indicate when one insurer had a different value from what we were saying was the standard for that plan. So we gave users the cleaner view with the high level, but gave them the option to compare so that we could appease the higher ups, also give them what they really would need, because some people will dig in deeper. And there was some feedback from people. Some of the users were saying, I want to compare, but it's too overwhelming. So I think that ended up being the right compromise to make sure that they could get both without being overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all about that nitty-gritties, what extra I could do, how could I improve this product. That helps a lot. And that brings me to my next question, Danny, that as a product manager, you want to make the best product. Sometimes you might not have that technical knowledge or technical acumen, and you might commit something which might be a challenge for engineering team. So how do you develop that thought process? Okay, this is something that customer want. This is something I have to deliver, but I have to also focus how engineering heavy it is. Yeah, how engineering heavy or engineering focused this particular feature is. So how do you have that process in your mind?
I think that that's a situation where you need to understand how big is the impact going to be for developing this and what other priorities do I have. If you have no other major priorities, or if you're saying users are truly not using this product because of not having this feature, we need to figure out a solution for this. And I'm never making that decision alone. If engineering is coming to me and saying the solution that you or your UX team or whoever is proposing to me is not something that we can feasibly do, or it's going to take a huge amount of money, time, resources, we won't be able to do anything else if this is what we're doing, then we need to take a step back and say, what other solutions do we have that could solve this problem in an easier way? Or can we break this down into an MVP approach, like I mentioned earlier, where we say, what is the bare minimum of this that we can build initially to start to see results initially, and then continually enhance it so that we're not just saying, let's have engineering spend all this time and resources on building this feature that you think is going to be good before you actually get that confirmed by users. Because you may find that users are saying they want this, then you say, okay, fine, we have to build it. We spend an entire month or quarter building, this feature, nothing else gets done, and then we release it, all the bells and whistles, and the users see it and they're like, yeah, it helps a little, but I still don't really care enough to use it, right? So that's the absolute worst case scenario as a product manager. And so you never want to push engineering to be building something that they're telling you is really hard, really resource intensive, unless you are 100% confident that it's going to work, and you're really never going to be 100% confident.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something I learned while I was working on a pro bono project with Dynata. And there we have to create a template that was to be filled by management team and then delivered to engineering team. And we had couple of interviews, and the biggest problem that came was management team focuses a lot on solutions and not the problem statement. It's the engineering team that should ideally talk about solutions. From the management perspective, you should clearly define the problem statement, give the resources to engineering team, and then let them focus on the solution part. And
Absolutely.
That is something which is so simple in front of our eyes, but still we can't see it in this field.
Yes, I do just want to differentiate there, though, between when we say the solution that engineering is coming up with, if it's a problem that's being solved, I'm bringing that problem. I'm also typically working with UX and to an extent engineering to say, here's what we think is the right solution and testing that solution. But in terms of how to actually implement that solution from a technical standpoint, that's not something that I want to be doing. I do not want to tell engineers, I do not want to get into the weeds with engineering. I want them to tell me how they're going to build that solution that I'm asking for, and I want them to weigh in their input on that solution as well.
100%, 100%. So, Denny, you have been in this field for a quite bit time. So, if I just have to ask you that, what is the what is that single feature or product that you are most proud of in your whole journey?
Okay, this is going to sound maybe a little bit lame,
Okay.
but this was something that just brought me so much happiness. So I mentioned I worked in insurance. I did that for 4 years, and insurance is boring, right? Nobody really cares
Yeah.
about insurance. There was about 1 year of my time in that insurance company that I absolutely loved what I was doing, and it was a year that I was working on a pet insurance product. It was a website to sell pet insurance, and someone before me had built a website, and it had been designed beautifully. They put a lot of money and research into the design, the tagline, the colors, everything like that. And they launched it, and it was just not selling really at all. And part of it was marketing was just not really there, but part of it was that the website just wasn't converting even those users that were coming to it. And so they basically got rid of everyone who was working on it, replaced the whole team, and I was put in charge, and I was told, okay, we already put a ton of money into this. You're getting a small budget. You're getting one offshore UI engineer and half of an onshore. And same thing for the API team. I had basically 3 engineers total, and fix it. And so I did a ton of research into that, and I looked at other pet insurance websites. And I'll also say I'm a big animal person. I have 2 cats. I love all animals, and I know that a lot of people view their animals like their children. I feel similarly, and people really care about pet insurance, and because it's going to be there for their pets. If their pet, gets diagnosed with cancer or is hit by a car, God forbid, any of those things, you want to know that you will be covered and will not, be put into a horrible financial situation that you have these enormous bills to pay and have to decide between that and your pet's life. And so I was excited about the product for that reason, but also pet insurance isn't that heavy on the insurance side. It's just a handful of questions, an easy rating system. So it was very much about the user experience. So I did all of this research on competitor sites. I called up some existing customers to ask them because that was the only people I could get contact information from. And I basically asked them about their experience and what they did or didn't like and why they ultimately chose to purchase. And I started to come up with a list, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but the biggest thing that I noticed both from the competitor sites and from talking to people was that once you got your price for your insurance, and in this case, it was just one insurance provider, not multiple. Once you got your price, you didn't really know what it was that you were actually getting. If you paid this amount, what are you getting in return? And our quote page had a bunch of sliders where you could decide. You basically configured your insurance plan with 3 different sliders or 3 different basically choices that you had to make. And it wasn't clear to people how those interacted with each other, what those necessarily were doing. And did that impact what coverage you're getting? Is it, if I choose a lower amount of coverage, does that mean that I don't get full coverage when my dog gets cancer? Or what do you pay for with cancer? Do you pay for overnight stays in the hospital? Do you pay for chemo? Do you pay for medication to help with the side effects of chemo? Do you pay for surgery? Do you pay for anesthesia? Like, what are all the things that end up getting covered? I don't know what I'm getting, and I don't know how these different configurations affect that. And so I put a ton of time into this and came up with 3 different designs for this page, where I narrowed it down to having 3 plans, similar to what I mentioned for auto insurance, where there was the kind of lower, medium, and upper tier plans. And then there was a click to customize option, where you could view those sliders in case you did care about all those other options. And then put in a very clear list of, here are the things that are covered, with an extra statement saying, we cover you for all of your pet's medical bills. If your dog gets cancer, we are covering all of the things related to that bill, to the vet bills you're going to get. Here's a list of things that we will never cover in case you need clarification on it. But no matter what tier of coverage, you are getting the same coverage. It's just a different amount that we'll pay towards it, but we're still covering that scenario. So I tested a few different versions that led me to this specific design that had the 3 options with a smaller click to customize, and then add that addition of that text. And I ran it again through our user testing, and listening to the responses that people had at the end of it. I'm sitting here working for a insurance company that has, I don't know, I think 80 or 90,000 employees in almost every country in the world. I think they're in like 145 countries in the world. And we're as insurance as it gets. And I'm sitting here listening to people say, this feels like a company that cares about my pet. It feels like not an insurance company. It feels like they want the best for my pet. And I was sitting there just speechless because it felt so good to have come out of it, seeing that we now gave them what they needed in a way that felt easy to understand, because insurance is not an easy thing to understand, and in a way that felt more personal to them, and caring. And those were all the things that I had been hoping to get, and I didn't think I would end up getting. And I was so incredibly proud of that end result.
Yeah, and I think this is the great thing about product management, the rewards you have, the happiness you see when a consumer tells how much value this product will bring to my life. And I think it's not just about creating feature. At the end of the day, it is more about providing value to the customer. They should have a seamless experience with your product that could help improve their life at the end of the day. And that is the reason I'm also very
Absolutely.
passionate about, yeah. And I think the way you describe that you love pets, I think that help you to have that ecosystem and thought process to improve this product in a much better way in comparison to someone who might not be very fond of having pets as well. So I think if in this field, if you could just get to a field where you are very passionate about, like for me, it's fintech. I love understanding human psyche, how they're spending the money, because I think that helps to understand where the economy is also going. So for me, our ideal world looks like working as a technical product manager on a fintech space using AI machine learning to create those tools, recommendation, and just to see how the consumers are changing their behavior at the end of the day. And so,
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a big part of product management is trying to not make assumptions, but at the same time, trying to put yourself into the shoes of your consumer. And while there are product managers for all kinds of products, and many of them do not use the products that they work on, you have to understand it well enough to be able to put yourself into the shoes of the end user. And it is definitely easier to do that when it's a product you're passionate about.
100%, yeah. And then we have been talking a lot about AI, machine learning, ChatGPT. How do you see these tools getting integrated or affecting the product management field? Do you think that it is going to be an asset or a liability for us?
That's a challenging one. I think it's still too early to really know. There are so many changes that are happening with that. I see more how it's impacting engineering. I know that, it will, I don't know yet how much it's going to take over certain engineering roles versus help them be better at what they're doing by catching their mistakes for them and automating certain processes there. From a product management perspective, it's so hard to say, because my view of product management is very much that you're sort of just the brain of the product. You're the center of the product, and it's so much of communication with different people, and creating compromises between people, and pulling together data from so many different sources that are not necessarily sources that exist on the internet, but from the people that you work with, from the end users, from your Google Analytics or whatever other analytics tools you use. You're pulling things from a lot of different places, and I don't yet know, is ChatGPT going to, or any of these other AI tools, going to have access to my Google Analytics account and be able to summarize for me, although Google Analytics already does a good job of summarizing, but are they going to be pulling in and saying, hey, FYI, this is data that you should focus on, and here's how you're going to solve it? I don't know that yet. I don't know how advanced it's going to get. It's been changing so much, so it's really hard for me to say how that's going to impact product management. But I see it a lot more in how it'll impact engineering, and I can see how it will help with a lot of the smaller roles that I do in a day-to-day basis to speed them up. What about you? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I have been using ChatGPT to summarize the information as well. I think it's very apt, but at the end of the day, it's a tool which will reward you on the basis of how you use it. So you have to be very intelligent around it. You don't have to be relying on it, but you have to ask it relevant questions. You have to keep pushing it till the extent you don't get what you want. So I think for me, ChatGPT is something as good as you are able to make out of it in terms of learning or anything else. So I'm super excited because I think a lot of brainstorming can happen with ChatGPT. It might give you some interesting insight, which I might have not thought. But again, it might be challenging as well because you will have a lot of resources. So again, you have to comprehend from them. You have to select one that makes the most sense. But I think if we are able to use it in an effective way, I think it can increase the productivity as well, at least for the task that should not consume a lot of brain power.
Yeah, but I would also be careful with that last piece about, getting the answer that you want, because as a product manager, you should never be looking to get an answer that you want. You should be looking to get the right answer across all those sources. And if you're reusing it and saying, well, this isn't the answer that I wanted, try again, then you're essentially using a confirmation bias to eventually get it to confirm what you wanted to in the first place, which is dangerous.
That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. So Jenny, I just wanted to hear from you. So what do you think will be most exciting thing about product management in the coming decade? What do you think what will change in this ecosystem? What new will come? What thing will be replaced? And what do you are most excited about in this coming decade?
I'm excited about the different products. I am not the best at saying what the future will hold. It sometimes scares me. It sometimes excites me, and things change constantly. And I mean, I think that, when I was a kid, I never would have imagined that I would end up in product management working closely with technology. And I definitely wouldn't have envisioned the use cases that we have today. I mean, going from the tiny little cell phone that I had in middle school that if you went on the internet, it cost you like $5 immediately and everything loaded so slowly, to now that, so many users do the majority of their online behaviors are from their phone. Majority of shopping is on their phone, all of that. I mean, is the future going to be in your glasses or a little chip that's planted? Is it going to be on your watch? I mean, that's right now, right? But where is it going to go even from there? But what I'm excited about is that I think product management is a role that has the ability to evolve with that technology. And, sometimes I'm working on a product and I say, well, this isn't all that exciting to me. Auto insurance, I don't know. I mean, it's insurance at the end of the day. That's not something I'm interested about. I also did shipping insurance, which was super uninteresting. And there are so many use cases for product management today, and some are interesting and some are not for me, and everyone will have some that are interesting and some that are not. And I think that at the very least, what I can say is that in the future of product management, the world of products that will be getting managed is going to explode. It's going to be so huge. There will be so many different directions you can go. And a lot of them will be things that directly impact your day-to-day life, which, as we were talking about earlier, it's a lot easier to be passionate about something when it's something that you actually use and understand. And when you understand the end user, because you are an end user, or you would be an end user under certain circumstances. And so that's what I'm excited about, is what those possibilities will look like. But I am not one that likes to predict what that future will actually be and what types of products I'll necessarily be working on. I just want to make sure that I am staying in the know about what those technologies are and how they work, so that when the time comes, I don't fall behind. And I don't, sit and say, well, that seems like a really cool idea to exist, but I don't really understand it. And I'd rather just stick with using my iPhone because that's what I'm used to. And I refuse to, adapt to what the new technology is. I think that's huge as a product manager, or really, I mean, for everyone, right? To stay on top of what those technologies are and how they're evolving, and learn about them, so that you can stay relevant and open up yourself to those different possibilities.
Yeah, 100%. Just a final question from my side, then. So I'm also an aspiring product manager, and if you just have to give me a couple of advices, couple of habits or thought process that I could inculcate to start my journey in the future, what will it be?
So I would go back to what I said earlier when I said that I learned don't say no, and always listening to what other people have to say. I think that is huge. Part of that is don't make assumptions. Anytime I say anything to my manager with the words, I assume this, she says, well, why are you assuming that? Did you talk to this person? Did you do this? Never assume, and don't say no are two of the hugest pieces of advice I can give to any product manager. And I think that the last thing I would say is, and I think this goes along with don't assume, is data is huge. I think that if you're a product manager that is relying on things that are not empirical, that are not data related, then you're already doing it wrong. You need to be not going based on your intuition, and not just based on what people inside of your company are telling you, but based on what the end users are, as well as what the end users are telling you. If it's an existing product and you have analytics for it, then what are the end users currently doing? And combine that with all of those other sources. You can't just pull your views from one source. You can't just pull it from 2 or 3 sources. You really need to think about what is the whole world of resources that can give opinions on this, and how do I narrow that down to make a decision of what's going to happen? And so those would be kind of the biggest pieces of advice that I would have for a product manager.
100%, 100%. Enjoy talking to you, Danny. It was such a pleasure. I think I got a lot more practical sense of how this field look like. I just love your passion, the accomplishment that you have. I think I'm getting much wiser after the conversation why I want to be a product manager. So this has helped me to be more sure that, okay, this is something I love it and I'm passionate about it. So thanks a lot for that.
Of course, I'm so glad to hear that. I am passionate about what I do. I love to see other people become passionate about it. I don't think enough people understand product management and enough people consider it as a career option. I think it's just a fascinating thing to be doing. And, if you ever want to stay in touch, I'm excited to see what ends up coming out of, once you graduate, where you end up. And I wish you the best in your product management career.
You have been listening to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Thank you to our When You Grow Up podcast student team and all the people who make this podcast possible, including our editors, Thomas Nishimoto and Josh Felton, our relationship associates, Camille Blake and Laura Flynn, our marketing coordinator, Himanshi Sharma, our project manager, Ben Stevens, our host students, and all of our guests.